Hey, Susan, I went ahead and bought an overseas luxury condo. After my father's funeral, my sister bragged about her surprise purchase. An overseas luxury condo. And I still have more than $100 million left. What to do? An overseas luxury condo? You bought it? I can't help but laugh. My sister's boasting made me and the relatives burst into laughter. What? What's so funny? My sister would not understand the reason for the laughter until several months later. I'm Susan, a 45-year-old housewife. I also work part-time. I have a husband and a high school-aged daughter. My mother passed away in an accident when I was young, and my father raised my sister and me. My father was diagnosed with an illness 2 years ago, had successful surgery, but relapsed and has been in the hospital for the past 3 months. I'm here to visit my father today. Thank you always. Sorry to always bother you, Susan. What are you talking about? Once you feel better, we'll go to your favorite French restaurant, okay? Bob's gonna take us. I mentioned my husband's name. Yeah, that sounds good. Give Bob my regards. Also, I brought this from Lily. Saying that, I spread out a drawing my daughter, who's in the art club, had made. I'm biased, but my daughter's good at drawing. My father used to draw and collect paintings, and he's very close to his granddaughter. The drawing, made for Grandpa, had a bright rainbow in the background that made you feel energized just by looking at it. Thank you. Lily has improved again. With a faint voice, he spoke and fell asleep shortly after. Seeing my increasingly frail father, I held back tears. I've been told by the doctors that surgery is no longer an option this time. But there's still hope if the medication works. I want him to live, even just a little healthier, even just a bit longer. I must not lose hope myself. Then, the hospital room door opened abruptly. Hi, Susan, long time no see. How's Dad? My sister appeared with an energy that seemed out of place in a hospital. Kitty, you've hardly shown your face lately. What have you been up to? What? I came, didn't I? Anyway, I've got something to talk about Dad's inheritance. What? You know the land worth $200 million that I mentioned before? Can I have it? I'll give you our father's savings or something. Hold on, before even talking about who gets what, do we need to discuss this now? Why not? It's important. Dad's still alive, and I want him to get better, if even just a little. Shouldn't we be more concerned about him? Even if you say that, what's incurable is incurable, right? Kitty. I glared at my younger sister without thinking. Usually, she doesn't care for our father at all, never visiting him in the hospital, and the first thing she talks about after not seeing him for so long is his inheritance. Doesn't she have any feelings for our father? I'm at my wit's end, but given that we're in a hospital, I swallowed my anger. My sister Kitty, who is 5 years younger than me, is single. While I've always been plain and enjoyed reading, in contrast, my sister liked fashionable and flashy things. She used to party all the time at trendy clubs and was popular with men, but she never had a long-lasting relationship with anyone, giving the impression of always moving on. Though she's 40 now, and I think she should settle down a bit, to each their own in life. Marriage doesn't necessarily mean happiness, and as long as she doesn't bother anyone, she can live freely. Although Kitty and I have different personalities, we're the only sisters, and we've never been particularly close, but we weren't on bad terms either. Until now. But since our father fell ill, Kitty changed. Or rather, her true nature has come out. It was 2 years ago when the disease was first discovered. The surgery had a 50-50 chance of success, and our father called my sister and me. My father's sister, Aunt Lucy, was also present. I want to talk about my inheritance in case something happens to me during this surgery. You see, I inherited some land and mountains in Nebraska. Back in the day, it was said to be worth $200 million. What? Kitty shouted out loud. I was also surprised. I knew that Dad was from Nebraska, but this was the first time I'd heard this story. Dad! So? Will Susan or I get that land? That's right, but the $200 million was a long time ago. It's a lot of trouble to manage. If you girls are fine with it, I'd like to ask Lucy first. After our mother's death, she took care of us a lot until we grew up. If it wasn't for Aunt Lucy, we would have felt lonelier, as our father was often busy with work. She's like a second mother to us, and we're as grateful to her as we are to our father. What? You're gonna give it to Aunt Lucy? That's impossible. That's not it. Kitty, let me finish talking. Dad, don't overdo it. That's right. There's no need to rush the conversation. Our aunt said that, turning to face us. Kitty, Susan, too. What my brother means isn't that he wants to give me the land. I received land from my parents just like him, and your father's inheritance is, of course, yours, my dear nieces. Oh, thank goodness. That's right, Aunt Lucy would never take our inheritance. Hey, Kitty. That was rude. But it's $200 million, Susan. You must be happy too. Sure, I was surprised. But you know, rural mountains are not like regular land, and they can't be sold easily, and they're hard to manage. Rather than accepting it directly, I should talk to a real estate agent first, and... Oh, enough, Aunt Lucy, just stay out of it. My sister quickly interrupted my aunt. We don't need your help with the inheritance. Susan and I will talk about it ourselves. If other people get involved, it'll just complicate things, right? But there might be things we don't understand on our own, so it might be safer with Aunt Lucy's help. Ugh, Susan, you've always relied too much on Aunt Lucy. Even though she'd been helped a lot herself. Hearing about the large inheritance had clearly excited my sister. The word $200 million seemed to be the only thing in her head. Well, both of you must be troubled to hear about this all of a sudden. Anyway, if the surgery is successful, there's no need to talk about the inheritance right now, right, Bob? That's right, Dad. I believe the surgery's gonna be successful. Let's hang in there. Yeah, thank you. In fact, the surgery was successful at that time, and I was genuinely happy, but I was shocked to see my sister clearly disappointed. After hearing about the inheritance, she changed, and since then she hardly visited the hospital and seemed to be out having fun. And this time too, she came rushing as soon as she heard about the recurrence. As we looked at our sleeping father's face and talked about his critical condition but that he was stable for now, she uttered unbelievable words. What? He's gonna hang on a little longer? Susan, let me know when it's critical. Are you seriously saying that? I managed to hold back my trembling voice as my sister nonchalantly replied. Well, what's done is done. But $200 million. Let's decide on this now. Enough. Just go home. I finally sent my sister away. Susan. Oh, Dad, I'm sorry. Did I wake you? No, Kitty's right. We should talk about the inheritance properly. You were listening? No, we don't need to talk about that. It's important, Susan. Listen well. Huh? And a few days later, I called my sister to discuss the division of the inheritance. My father requested that my aunt be present as well. So just to confirm, Susan, you're really giving me a piece of land worth $200 million? And there won't be any complaints later? It's our father's wish that we don't quarrel over the inheritance, I responded. My sister nodded contentedly. That's a relief. Dad must really love me, after all. Kitty, dear, there'll be no changing your mind later, wanting cash instead. Your share is in the form of land, all right? Of course. I won't ask to change the inheritance later. What I'm getting is $200 million. My father spoke up. I'll have the lawyer handle it properly and leave a will. Both of you are okay with this? Yes, get it done quickly. Thanks, Dad. Yay, I've got to call him. Kitty exclaimed. I felt a sadness beyond anger that my sister could say I've got to at such a time. I didn't need an inheritance if my father could recover. I wanted him to live longer. Didn't my sister feel the same way? As if sensing my emotions, Aunt Lucy placed her hand on my shoulder. I met her eyes and slowly nodded. After the distribution of the inheritance was finalized, Kitty seemed to be leading an increasingly luxurious life, relying on the $200 million. Even when I reached out about whether she wanted an explanation of the land or if Aunt Lucy should introduce a real estate agent, she just read the messages and ignored them. She just kept sending photos of the designer brands she'd been buying up, or of herself in expensive-looking restaurants and sushi places. I don't care what happens to such a heartless person anymore. I decided to spend time with my father every day, going to the hospital. My husband and daughter helped with the housework and came to see my father, as did relatives and his friends. Several weeks passed in this peaceful manner, but despite my wishes, my father departed for heaven. Susan, thank you, truly. I couldn't forget the face of my father, who smiled and said that at the end, and my tears wouldn't stop. My husband, daughter, and my aunt rushed over, and we shared our grief. I contacted Kitty first, but she was slow to appear, leaving me to arrange the viewing and funeral. She finally showed up after the viewing had ended. Sorry, Susan, I'm late. What have you been doing? And what's with that outfit? I was speechless. Although she was wearing black funeral attire, her makeup was heavy, her nails were colorful. Her brightly colored hair was untied. But I was on vacation with him. I even rushed back for this. When her father was in the hospital and his condition wasn't very good. Would she really go on vacation at such a time? I just can't understand her mindset anymore. Anyway, please pay your respects to Dad, and say hello to all the relatives. You better take off those nails, I scolded. Yeah. Stop nagging. The next day, after the Mass, while everyone was waiting for the burial and reminiscing about my father, Kitty boasted. Hey, Susan, I bought a penthouse abroad. What? A penthouse abroad. And I still have over $100 million left. What should I do? Should I buy a condo in the States? Or go on a cruise? I've pretty much bought all the brand items I wanted. You bought a penthouse abroad? Really? You already bought it? Heh, you're jealous, right? He and I are going to live there together. Kitty, $200 million, $200 million, you mean? Oh, no, don't even think about splitting it in half. We decided on the inheritance distribution beforehand, and Aunt Lucy is a witness, you know? I can't help but laugh. My sister kept talking proudly, and I, along with Aunt Lucy and all the relatives, couldn't help but burst into laughter. What's so funny? You know what, right? You mean the $200 million from that mountain? Kitty, are you okay? No, this is insane. What? What's going on? Sorry. Kitty, were you trying to cheer us up since we were feeling down? What? You keep saying $200 million, $200 million, but did you actually check? Huh? Check what? You haven't actually received $200 million in cash yet. Your inheritance is the mountain and land. What? So that's going to turn into $200 million. Don't say something crazy just because you're bitter. The funeral's over, so I'm going to turn it into money right away. My headstrong sister seemed to understand nothing. You sure you don't need any help? Aunt Lucy asked. We have to go there at least once, you know. Since it's our hometown, should we show you around? Our last act of kindness was also abruptly rejected by my sister. I don't need it. It's useless to try to get your hands on the leftovers. With that, she left, ignoring the stares of the relatives. My sister, who didn't even see my father's last moments, felt no sadness and thought only of her inheritance. Divine punishment is coming soon. And a few months later, I got a message from my sister saying she really wanted to see me. Hey, Susan, It's been a while. How's living abroad? I didn't really understand the inheritance thing, it seems. Inheritance? Oh, the $200 million dream life, right? Did you come to brag about it? I answer coolly. No, that land, it's not selling for $200 million at all. I figured as much. What? I told you from the beginning, the property value was $200 million at the time. What? That was the total valuation of the land at the time. You can only get $200 million by selling it. But the real estate agent says it's not worth anything close to $200 million in this condition. That's obvious. To sell, it has to be in a perfect, well-maintained condition. But even then, selling forest land these days is tough, I hear. What? You need to prevent tree erosion and landslides, and it's a region that's becoming more and more depopulated every year. Plus, if it's not well kept, finding a buyer is next to impossible. Don't joke around. If the land doesn't sell, I still have to pay inheritance tax and property tax. What's going on here? That's just how it is. What about my $200 million? Calm down, take a breath. How can I possibly calm down about this? I never knew this was the situation. No, you normally check when inheriting land, right? It was written in the documents. But the document was so long and I couldn't read all of it. I just signed it so it would be mine right away. Your greed and failure to investigate are to blame. Dad tried to explain that it was hard to manage, and Aunt Lucy said many times she would help deal with the contractor. You ignored them all. But still. What did you come here for? So, I thought, maybe we can talk about the inheritance split again. My sister's face is pale, even though she's smiling. The inheritance is already settled, it's impossible. You made sure of that promise. Wait. You knew it wasn't really $200 million, right? If you knew and didn't tell me, that's fraud. Even though she was the one who wouldn't listen, calling it fraud is quite an accusation. It's no lie. The land was worth $200 million at the time, I swear. We tried to tell you several times. We've got the call and email records to prove it. Who's the one who ignored all that and just kept sending pictures of the extravagant life? Huh? Why not have a reputable dealer take care of maintenance or sale for you now? You could make some money out of it. I've been trying different places these past few months. But everywhere I go, they lie and say it's only worth a few $1,000s, so I turned them down. Oh dear, what a waste. What? Aunt Lucy! At that moment, Aunt Lucy appeared. I called her because you said you were coming today. In those mountains in Nebraska, the burden of management and financial costs outweigh any profits. You must appreciate anyone willing to take it on. What do you mean? I told you repeatedly. Even for me, a local, it took years of pleading with lumber companies, local governments, forestry associations, and folks to finally let go of that land. If it didn't turn out to be a loss, I'd be thankful. Really? No way, that's a lie. Blood drained from Kitty's face. Aunt Lucy's land was much smaller. Dad's land was originally worth $200 million, so we should at least get a few $1,000,000, right? My sister yelled, turning pale. You're still saying that? Aunt Lucy laughed off the comment. Even if there were valuable trees for lumber, we could have made a profit by selling them. But there's nothing like that in those mountains. What? What? I thought about just renouncing the inheritance since it's not worth much money, and the procedure is troublesome. My sister's face lit up at those words. That's right, there's that option. If it's a liability, just renounce it. That mountain, I'll give it up. Then the inheritance my sister got will be half mine. Kitty said, as if she had come up with a brilliant idea, confidently exposing her ignorance. Sorry to burst your bubble, but you only have 3 months from the time decedent died. What? Dad's been gone for nearly 6 months, so it's too late to renounce the inheritance now. What? Besides, if you renounce the inheritance, you give up everything else, too. What you're saying is crazy.
So what should I do? I bought a condo overseas.
You're on the path to staggering debt repayment. That's terrifying.
No. Help me, Susan.
No way, darling.
Don't be like that.
Ask your boyfriend for help. That guy found out the inheritance wasn't gonna be $200 million and he ran away. Now he's gone without a trace. Ugh, I can't believe it. I figured as much.
What?
My sister, who indulged in luxury, depending on her father's inheritance while he was fighting his illness, and her boyfriend, who'd party around with her. Anyone could have predicted that he would run away if he found out there was no money. You're just like that. You value money more than people, changing your attitude depending on whether you have it or not. I have no intention of forgiving Kitty, who never took care of our father, who never showed gratitude or sorrow towards him. I'm fed up too. My brother waited till the end, believing that Kitty would come.
Susan! Aunt Lucy! Please, I'm sorry.
The person you need to apologize to isn't me. It's too late. You must have had many chances to realize it when he got sick, when it relapsed.
That.
Even looking at my sister's pale, tearful face, I didn't feel a shred of sympathy. She brought this on herself. Well then, goodbye. Good luck paying for the luxury you indulged in, counting on the inheritance. I closed the door with a smile. A year later. It seems my sister is working hard to repay her debts. Her ex-boyfriend, who signed as a joint guarantor thinking $200 million would come in, was working hard, too. I was surprised that they found him instantly, though my sister couldn't find him no matter how hard she looked. The two of them are working hard in harsh labor. I wonder how many decades it will take to repay the debt. As for me, I consulted with Aunt Lucy and relatives and built a grand tombstone with my father's inheritance. It seems my sister was mistaken, but there wasn't much left in my father's savings in the first place. There were property management fees, and he said to pay all the funeral expenses from his savings, so there's not much money left. That doesn't bother me at all, but my father had an unexpected gift for his granddaughter. A painting owned by my father had passed to my daughter.
Grandpa said it's a birthday present.
Your grandfather told me to tell Susan after things had settled down. I was surprised when my daughter and husband told me. My daughter whispered, "You know, one of them is supposed to be really valuable. Grandpa said if something troubles me in the future, I could get it appraised or sell it."
Really? I have no idea. You're not into art, Mom. But I don't want to sell it. I'm gonna treasure it forever, along with my memories with Grandpa.
My daughter's smile beamed. I looked up at the blue sky, thinking my father would be pleased too.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. "All right, everyone's presentations are done." "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me. "There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer." He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. "Still here?" Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. "I'm leaving." I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick! What's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? Alright, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.